2020, Gisborne, New Zealand. We see a small school where kids are running around and minding their business. Then we see a shot of Julian Dennison's character called Michael Webster. He was sitting on the desk and waiting for the next lesson to start. But then at least 8 police vehicles passed through the school. Michael sees them through the window and he's so worried. Then he felt the school building shaking and he got so nervous. After that we get to see a family which is having a picnic. And they hear the roaring of Kong. They look at the beach and they see Kong, which was rising from the water. He was looking super scary. Then he saw a small village and he saw humans too. He soon remembered what he came here for and he started destroying village. Of course when he was swimming, Monarch noticed him and they followed him, and they were shooting the Kong to stop him. They were shooting everything they had, but Kong was very strong and he kept destroying the village. Then we get to see shot of Michael, which was coming out from school. He saw Kong, which was smashing buildings, and one of them was a fast food restaurant where his mom was working. He got so worried, but then Kong looked at him. Michael got so scared that he couldn't move. Kong was about to smash when he heard the roar of Godzilla. Kong looked at the ocean and he saw Godzilla, which was looking with super angry face. Godzilla didn't seem to be happy about what Kong was doing, and Godzilla roared at him once again. Kong was looking at him like he wanted to say, "Don't get in my way." Godzilla went towards him, Kong went towards him. And the fight begun. Godzilla first tried to fight Kong, but Kong soon dodged and hit Godzilla. Godzilla tried once again, but as it appeared Kong was much stronger than Godzilla because Kong was lighting. Then Michael started running towards the fast food restaurant only to find it completely smashed. He saw people running around but he couldn't see his mother anywhere. Then he heard the roar of Kong. He looked and saw how charged Kong kicked his feet to Godzilla's rib. Then he started running towards ruins and pushing bricks away in hopes of finding her mother, but unfortunately he couldn't. Then we see Osprey helicopter flying above him. Soon another 5 Ospreys fly above Michael. Michael stood in silence and tear got on his eye. Then we see Kong, which is sitting on Godzilla and looking at destroyed city and survivors which were crying and were helping other people. Kong felt guilty. But then he heard weird noises coming from Godzilla. He felt strange and Godzilla stroked him atomic breath. Kong got pushed away and Godzilla stood up with an intimidating face.
Godzilla has left us to die. He left this world to die, so did Kong, Radon, Mothra and others. But if you actually think about this, you can't blame them. It was all fault of alien called Space Godzilla which caused all the Titans to go rogue. And each of the Titans did their part of protecting Earth's balance. And now their gun and world has gone through a terrible things. Countless tsunamis, wildfires, many deadly viruses and much more. Earth started getting destroyed, and within the 6 years the Earth has changed completely. I'm George Potts. I used to work for Monarch, but since this apocalypse, well, you know, I'm with a small group of survivors in Hong Kong. This city is completely empty and dead. I never thought that Hong Kong itself would become a ghost town, anyway. I don't know why I talk this much. Well, if you get this message, please send us a reply, and we can know that we are not alone in this. And even meet each other if that's possible. It was George Potts, over.
After that we see empty streets of Hong Kong. We see newspapers dropped on the road full of non-functioning cars. Then we see a wolf passing the streets, but then he hears the sounds of a truck. He looks at the other side of the road and see giant Pepsi truck which is headed directly at him. Wolf gets scared and runs at the other side of the road. Pepsi truck passes the roads with the giant iron spikes on its front to get the non-functioning vehicles out of the way. Then we see George Potts, which is driving this truck, and he's older now. Then we see a new character, Jason Armstrong. He is blonde man in his middle 20s. He was sitting next to George Potts thinking about something. Then they drive for some time and they reach small survivor camp near Hong Kong. They have everything they need. They have seed farms, tents, small wood houses, and more. Then we see kids which are playing with ball. Then we see George and Jason getting out of the truck. Then they meet an old lady and tell her that they brought what they asked them for. Old woman looked at both of them suspiciously and sent a few men to open the truck, and they brought some boxes out of there. They put them on the ground and opened them. They saw a lot of dead fish in the boxes. One of the men smiled and said that it'd be enough for quite some time. Then George Potts looked back at old woman and told her, "Now you believe me?" He smiled and he walked past her. Then Jason also looked at that old woman and told her, "You should stop suspecting us, ma'am," and he also walked past her. Then we see a black Labrador running towards Jason. Jason shouted, "Fenrir!" He sat down on the ground and started cuddling his dog. Then we see George Potts sitting down and talking to another man. He asks him, "Any response on that message yet?" This man gets a little angry and yells at him, "Seriously, man? We sent that message 4 years ago and you've been asking this almost every week. If we ever get a response I'll tell you, man." "Yeah, I've been a cunt," and started laughing. This man told him that he was crazy and got his headphones on. After that we see Jason, which is still cuddling his dog, but then 10-year-old kid started running towards the center of the camp and started shouting, "They are coming! They are coming!" Then we see a few men grab their guns and stand at the gate of the camp. Then we see around 6 red jeeps stopping near the gate and we see terrorists in red uniforms coming out. All of them were holding rifles. Then we see an armored red jeep also coming and stopping near the gate and we see an evil man with sunglasses. His name was Thomas Marino. He came out holding Desert Eagle and wearing armor gillet. Then he started slowly walking towards the gate. Then he shouted, "Hello my fellow friends. Remember our offer?" Then Jason came out and asked him to not do this. But Thomas smiled and said, "A deal is a deal. Now give us what we want or we will raid you. We all have guns, see?" And he pointed at his soldiers, which started reloading their weapons. Then Thomas asked once again, "So what are we getting? A food or a woman?" Jason looked at the survivors disappointed and went in there to ask them what they would bring, but they chose to give them the woman since food would barely be enough for them anyways. Then George Potts looked sad and pointed the men at something. 3 men of the camp caught a young woman and tied her with chains. She was screaming that this was madness, but no one could do anything else at that point. Thomas sent his 3 men. They took her and put her in a small pickup with cage on it. Then Thomas told the survivors, "Goodbye fellow friends," and started laughing. Then he went towards his jeep and left the place. Then George Potts said, "Okay everybody. Now come here. I wanted to keep these toys only for me, but now I guess we all need them." Around 40 people gathered there and George Potts climbed inside the Pepsi truck. After 20 seconds he came out with a huge black box and dropped on the ground. Then he told the men to open it and they do as he says. They opened the box and saw a bunch of rifles, guns and grenades put in that box. Then they looked at George with surprised face. And George said, "I have 2 more boxes like this in the back. Let's have fun, shall we?" After that we see Pepsi truck going on full speed on the roads. Then we see armed men which are inside and are preparing for fight. Then we see Jason, which is sitting on the front seat and looking at his new mask, and he smiles. Then he gets his AK-47 and reloads it. Then we see giant aircraft carrier docked on the shore, Nano Bay. We see people of Thomas having a small camp on an aircraft carrier. They have tents, cages, gun places and more. Then we see Thomas walking around and checking on his men. Then we see one of his men climb the small watchtower they put on an aircraft carrier. Then he takes out his sniper and sits on the chair up there. Then we see long yellow racing roads on front of the aircraft carrier where around 3 sport cars are racing and 1 fence is separating the racing roads and the camp. Then we see Thomas stop and whisper under his breath, "The fact that this giant crap we're on isn't working sucks." After that we see Pepsi truck stopping on a mountain and 24 men come out of the back of the truck, and Jason also comes out soon. He pulls up his binoculars and takes a look at the aircraft carrier. Then he says, "They're around 60. And we're only 26. We're massively outnumbered." Then one of the men told him, "It is what it is. We have that tank-like truck, get to the main subject. Do you see our women?" Jason said to him while still holding his binoculars, "Yeah, they have captured 5 women of ours. And fortunately all of them are on the same place." Then George came out of the truck holding shotgun and asked, "So? What are we doing now?" Jason said, "See that little wooden bridge connecting land and the aircraft carrier? We can fit our Pepsi truck and full-on raid their camp. That truck has an amazingly good armor and it shouldn't much problem, and we can get out and start our rescue and rampage when we have to. Then we get our women inside the truck and leave as few of them alive as possible, so they won't be on the list of our problems." Then George said, "Sounds good. Ain't you smart? Where did you learn all that strategies though?" Jason told him, "Nowhere." And he started walking towards the Pepsi truck. Then other men got inside too and George soon hopped inside too. Then George pulled up the brakes and said, "Let's go baby," and started the truck at full speed. Then we see Thomas, which is resting outside, but then he hears men shouting and opens his eyes. He looks at the mountains and sees Pepsi truck heading towards them at full speed. Then he stands up immediately and starts shouting, "Are you blind? Shoot at that garbage now." Then Thomas's men started shooting their weapons at the truck, but it barely had an effect. Then we see Jason getting his mask on and he pulled his head out of window and started shooting with his AK-47. After a few missed bullets he managed to kill 2 men of Thomas. Thomas got scared and started running inside the controlling center of aircraft carrier, and as he got inside, Pepsi truck got on the aircraft carrier and started walking over Thomas' men. Then we see George, which is laughing inside while drifting the truck like a crazy man. Then Jason tells him, "Time's to stop." Then they stopped the truck and 7 men of Thomas stood behind the truck facing the cargo. Then back of the truck opened and 27 started firing from inside and they soon killed all 7 of them. Then we see the men getting out and running towards the cage where the women were held, while killing every man and woman of Thomas on the way. A couple of the survivors die in the process, but they just don't stop. Then we see racing car in the other end of aircraft carrier drifting and heading towards them. Survivors start shooting at it, but it just doesn't stop. Then George shouts, "Get down!" and fires his rebounds per game at the car. The car turns away, but the impact of explosion launches the car into the sea. Then one of the survivors shouted, "You never fail to surprise us, old man." Then Jason and other men got to the cage and rescued 5 women from there. They got them in the truck and soon drove off from there. Then Jason said to George, "We should have done this a long time ago," and cracked a smile. George said while driving, "Yeah, you are 101% right," and started laughing. 10 minutes later, then we see Pepsi truck approaching the camp, but they see a huge flame coming from there. Jason looks so worried and George said nervously, "What the hell is happening?" Then they approach the gate and it's completely destroyed and taken down. Then they see burnt farms and tents, completely smashed houses, human corpses and fences, Jason's dog, corpse. Then other men and women got out of the truck, shocked as equally as Jason and George. Then Jason asked, "Who or what would do this?" Then George shouted angrily, "Why do we always have life-threatening problems?" and dropped the shotgun he was holding on the ground. But then Jason saw a corpse of well-armed soldier in black suit. He asked George, "Do you remember anyone having this armor?" George answered, "No, maybe they attacked us but our people resisted." Then Jason started looting that soldier's corpse and found an USB chip. Then he looked at it closely and said, "This might have an useful information on it," and put it in his socket. Then we see other survivors investigating the destroyed camp, but then they hear helicopter sounds. Then Jason shouts, "Hide!" and they all hide behind left bushes, Pepsi truck and other stuff. Then Jason and George looked towards the direction where helicopter noises were coming from, and they couldn't believe their eyes. Jason said stutteringly, "Holy shit." They saw 14 black helicopters carrying the head of Mechagodzilla. George stared at them for 5 seconds and shouted, "What the f***?" After that we see a few survivors walking through the streets of Hong Kong, still confused about why anyone would need Mechagodzilla's head. Then Jason asked loudly, "They might have taken the head of that mechanical crap, but why the hell would they slaughter entire camp?" Then George answered, "I guess they didn't want anyone else to know about whatever the hell they are planning to do with that head." Then Jason said quietly, "I guess you are right. But we didn't even get the chance to bury all of them." George nodded his head and kept walking. Then they heard helicopter sounds. George shouted, "Hide, you fools!" and they all rushed inside the nearest building. Then we see helicopter which has logo of Nirax on it. Jason whispered, "What the hell is Nirax?" bad guys. George whispered back. Then helicopter circled back and disappeared. Jason came out of building and said under his breath, "What the hell is happening?" After that we see 14 helicopters carrying the head of Mechagodzilla and we get to see title. Hobyo, Somalia. Northeastern Africa, we see giant futuristic base built near the shore. Then we see at least 30 warships surrounding the base, each filled with heavy armored soldiers. Then we get back to the base. It was so long, about 800 meters in length and 400 meters in width. Then we see a giant hole in the center of the base, but the lights are completely off in there. Then we see helicopters passing the giant penthouse and we see a skinny man in his early 30s standing near the glass wall looking down at whole base. Then he hears noises from his walkie-talkie. The person on the walkie-talkie is saying that they've delivered what they were asked for. Then the man smiles and tells them, "Good job, we really needed that head," and put his walkie-talkie on the table behind him. Then he went towards kitchen and was about to open the refrigerator when he heard the knocking on the door. He shouted, "It's open. Come in." Then an old man in his 60s opened the door and walked towards with happy expression on his face. Then the man shouted, "Who else? If not our famous Alvin Clark?" Alvin smiled and told him, "Looks like they've brought the package. This plan better work." Michael Webster. Michael smiled and said, "This will work. It has to. Otherwise I won't be able to avenge my family." And his happy face soon changed to very serious expression. Then the doctor woman came and told Alvin that they were calling him in a Sector B5. Then Alvin shouted, "Miss Brown. We're barely having enough time to know each other, aren't we?" Then Michael told Alvin, "You should probably go." Then Alvin said, yes, of course." And he walked out of the room, but after 5 seconds he pulled his head back in Michael's penthouse and asked him, "Do you really think Project BR will work? If you do then I do too." And he shut the door. Michael turned back to the glass wall and said under his breath, "Of course I do." After that we get back to the survivor which are walking aimlessly in the streets. Then George suddenly remembers something and says, "I think it's time we start searching for other Titans, and what better place than Skull Island?" Jason and others looked at him with confused face. Then one of the survivors asked, "Even if we got to Skull Island and saw Titans, what then?" George says, "I didn't want to say this earlier cause I wasn't sure, as the matter of fact I still am not, but I think Monarch has a base there. A huge base, and I think they'll manage to take 28 people, huh? Plus we have nowhere to go and soon we will run out of food and even water. We gotta try something, people." Then Jason told him, "You are nuts, old man." Then one of the survivors asked him, "Okay. Let's go. I like the idea. But how? There is an entire ocean separating China and Skull Island." Then George thought for a moment and said, "Think there is a functioning yacht in a several kilometers. But I'm wearing you, we'll need a lot of walking." Then Jason smiled and said, "We've walked enough. I say we go to that freaking yacht right freaking now." And he put his hand on George's shoulder and asked him, "Where's that yacht?" George answered, "It's in Shantou. We'll need to walk few miles to get there." Then of the women asked them angrily, "Why do we have to walk? Why did you even abandon your truck, old man?" George shouted back at her, "Because these goddamn soldiers are still patrolling this area. And seeing moving truck here is like seeing bar of gold in dirt. We're too exposed." Then he started walking away. He looked back at them and asked, "Are you coming or not?" Jason started following him and others started following him too. After that we see Michael, which is sitting in his giant penthouse drinking a glass of water with lemon inside. Then Dr. Brown tells him that he is needed in main sector A. He says, "Here we go." And stands up. He stretches out his arms and starts walking towards the exit door from his house. Then he walks into hallway for about half a minute and gets into elevator. He presses buttons and goes down. Then we see controlling center with giant glass wall looking at dark empty space. Then we see Dr. Alvin Clark looking at glass wall and thinking about something. Then door opens and Michael walks in smiling. Then he stands next to Dr. Alvin and asks him, "So, is my toy ready to be played with?" Dr. Alvin smiled and told him, "That toy isn't only yours, you have to share." And started laughing. Michael also started laughing and said, "Sharing is boring, old man. But did you do what you needed head of Mechagodzilla for?" Then he said, "Yes. Everything is completed." Then Michael shouted, "Then turn it on." And Mike slowly started to turn on. They soon got fully lit and we see giant mecha with the head of Rhino, red lines on it and heavy fists. Then Dr. Alvine shouted, "Ladies and gentlemen, let me present to you Black Revenge. Superior mecha than Mechagodzilla. And let me tell you, Mechagodzilla was just a little puppy compared to this masterpiece." Then he told Michael, "Get into the cube. We should practice controlling it telepathically." The Michael said, "I'm on it." He went to the corner of the room where a blue glass was placed with all power engines, and in the center there was a blue custom which looked like Power Ranger suit. Michael got in and put the suit on. Then engines got turned on. He felt a little pain in his brain. It took him a few seconds and he got normal again. Then he started moving his hands and we see Black Revenge also moving his hand. Then Michael jumped up and that led to BR jumping too. Dr. Alvine shook a little bit and he started laughing and shouting happily, "It's working! It's working! Time to slay some titans." Then he told one of the women sitting with the computer to track nearest titan. Then women started typing something and soon she told him, "Titan called Yamato no Orochi is hanging out in Tokyo." Then he told her to set the course. Then he looked back at the BR and said, "We will go hunting now." BR got activated and humans started pulling up the iron it was placed on, and it soon started walking slowly to the empty field. Then Dr. Alvine told Michael through communication AirPods to speed up a little bit. Michael said, "Okay," and started shaking his legs faster, and that led to BR walking faster too. Then Dr. Alvine told him, "Good. We're now sending coordinates to Tokyo. You should meet our first lab rat." Michael told him, "Understood." Dr. Alvine sent coordinates and BR changed the direction of where he was running. After that we see group of survivors still walking and they stop at some sort of dock. They see one nasty yacht. Then George shouted, "It isn't beautiful but it'll work if we all do some work on it." Then Jason said, "This ugly junk is our only hope, so there is no other way." And he stepped a few steps towards George and asked him, "What should we do?" George smiled and told him, "First I'll need 10 men to fix the tubes which are transporting fuel, then another few men should start looking for fuel which is in a small town not too far away from here, it's called Jian, and you'll find a gas station there." Then Jason said, "Okay. Then I'll take 3 men with me. And rest will be at your service, George." Then George shouted, "Then let's start." Jason got his mask on and shouted, "3 men with me." They found some motorcycles with little fuel left inside. They got on the bikes and Jason looked at George and told him, "This better work," and drove off, and other 3 men followed. Then George shouted, "Okay. Rest of you. Let's get this thing ready." Then he turned to women too and told them, "We could use your hands too, ladies," and cracked a smile. After that we see Tokyo which is in complete dust and dirt. Then we see 5 Sika deer walking in the streets of Tokyo. But then they hear strange noises and after 5 seconds BR jumps on them and crashes them completely. Then we see BR smashing his 2 fists together and we hear the roar of Yamato no Orochi. Then we see 8-headed Hydra, Yamato no Orochi, roaring at BR with full rage. Then we get back to the base of Nirax and we see Dr. Alvine communicating with Michael and telling him, "Good job, Michael. You have successfully found out first experiment. Now tear him apart." Michael said, "I'm on it, old man." And he made BR unleash its robotic roar as an intimidation. Yamato no Orochi started running towards it. BR jumped up and caught one of his heads. Yamato no Orochi started biting it with his other heads, but its metal was so strong that they all broke their teeth. Then BR took Yamato through one of his heads and started swinging him like a baseball bat, and after 10 seconds he threw Yamato away. Yamato no Orochi fell so painfully and he could barely get up. Just then BR took him through his tail and pulled him closer. It dropped him again and smashed one of his heads with his foot. Other heads started roaring hopelessly, and soon he took one of the heads and held them tightly with his hands. It started pushing hands harder and harder and it exploded one of his heads. Then with 6 heads left Yamato jumped up far from him and tried to run away. BR chased him and after 10 seconds he caught him through his tail and pulled him back to it, then started tearing its heads off one by one until one last head was left. Then it looked at Yamato no Orochi's last head and eyes and started choking him. Then he put its second hand into his throat and took out his organs, and he dropped corpse of Yamato no Orochi on the ground. Then BR turned around and was about to start walking when he heard the roar of Godzilla. BR looked back and saw Godzilla which was walking towards it with so angry face. BR roared back at him. Godzilla roared once again and started running towards him. BR also started running towards him. Then when they were so close to each other, BR jumped and punched Godzilla in the face. Godzilla got exhausted and fell on the ground. Then BR caught him through his ribs and started dragging him, and he threw him away. Then it was about to punch him when Godzilla crawled away and BR hit the ground. Then Godzilla stood up and bit it in a hand. Godzilla felt how strong the metal was, but he didn't give up anyways. BR took him off its hand and dropped Godzilla on the ground. Then he was about to punch Godzilla real hard, but Godzilla shot his atomic breath to BR's head and BR got so exhausted and soon got knocked on the ground. Then it tried to stand up, but Godzilla's stepped on its chest. Then we see Dr. Alvine, which is shouting, "Come on! Come on! You are bigger than that lizard with 35 meters." Then Godzilla started charging his atomic breath, but BR pulled out giant and thin spiky tail from its rib and it stabbed Godzilla in the back. Godzilla got really hurt and screamed in pain. Soon BR took him out and punched him in the face so hard that it knocked him out. Then he got up and held Godzilla with his mouth. Then we see Dr. Calvine shouting, "Come on! Come on! Break his jaw! You got this, boy! Finish him!" Then BR just dropped Godzilla on the ground and punched him once again in the face. Then Michael said, "He tried to protect my town and my mother. I need to kill Kong first. And I'll only kill Godzilla if he gets in my way. Understood?" Then Dr. Alvine said in disappointment, "All fine. Then what are you waiting for? Go to Skull Island. We put special swimming equipment, remember?" Michael said, "Yeah. I know." And started walking towards the shore, but then he stopped and said, "We need to recharge it first. I'm coming back to the base." And he started walking in different direction. Then we see Godzilla, which is trying to stand up, but he falls back soon. After that we see Jason and other men riding towards the yacht with fuel tanks attached to the bikes. Then they get to the place and they see all the men resting. Then Jason asked while smiling, "What's happening? Why aren't you working?" Then George shouted, "We already did our work. And what the hell took you so long?" Jason said, "We encountered some unexpected predators in the city, but we're all fine fortunately." While loading the fuel tanks towards the yacht, they poured the fuel in the yacht and they all got on the yacht. Then George took the seat of the driver and shouted, "Captain George Potts at your service." And he started laughing. Then Jason told him, "Get us the hell away from this place." And went down in the rooms of yacht. Then we see George starting the engines and says, "To the Skull Island we go." And pulled the brakes. Yacht started swimming in the ocean and swam further and further away. Then we saw Miss Myrna running towards the dock where they took off from. He started shouting, "You cowards! You are all gonna die." But then he heard the howling of the wolves. He turned around and saw 4 wolves standing behind him getting ready to eat him. Thomas pulled out his pistol and shot one of them, but other 3 ran towards him. He killed him one more, but 2 wolves started tearing him apart and he started screaming for life. Then we see Jason on the yacht, which is looking at that dock with his binoculars. He says, "Good thing we didn't kill these predators." He smiled and walked away. After that we see BR, which is going back to where it was launched from. Then we see Michael, which is coming out of the controlling box. He is so exhausted that he almost falls. 2 soldiers hold him and help him to stand. Then we see Dr. Alvine drinking the glass of water and he asks Michael, "So how was it?" Michael answered stutteringly, "It was amazing. I felt like the strongest creature on this entire planet." Dr. Alvine answered, "Well, you aren't wrong." And cracked an evil smile. Then he turned back to BR, which was turned off now, and said, "We have the strongest weapon humanity has ever known. And unfortunately not many are alive to see this masterpiece. But you, Michael. You made a mistake. You should have killed that lizard right on the spot." Michael sat down on the couch and told him, "That lizard isn't my target. I'll only kill him if he gets in my way. And as it seems he was the second lab rat which I spared. And I hope that fat lizard appreciates the second chance I gave him." Dr. Alvine was looking at him so disappointed and angry. Then he said, "Okay, whatever. We'll recharge BR and head to the Skull Island." Michael stood up and asked him, "How long will it take?" Dr. Alvine answered, "Around week. To charge it fully." Michael said, "Sounds good to me." And he walked towards the exit door. Then he turned back to Dr. Alvine and told him, "You better behave yourself, old man. Or I'll have my men execute you." He opened the door and rushed outside. Dr. Alvin got a bit scared and said under his breath, "Okay, tough boy." After that we see South Pacific Ocean, we see Eagle flying over an ocean, after that we see Yacht swimming in the ocean, then we see Jason which is enjoying the view, then we see few men and women having a little dance party playing song Macarena and dancing, then we see George which is in the driving center and he's so bored, he yawns and says, "How far is this island, man?" Then he heard the knock on the door, he shouted, "Come in." Jason came in and sat next to him, then Jason asked him, "How's everything going so far?" George told him, "Pretty good. We missed Philippines last night and will be on Skull Island soon." Jason said, "You know, I'm gonna miss our old life. Everything was so simple in our old settlement, we had food, water." But before he continued George said, "And armed gang which would take away our food or woman, what is to miss from our old life, Jason? Just think about it, young man." Jason said, Yeah, you are right. But I hope that we'll have a better life on Skull Island, you know." George told him, "I can't promise you that." Jason was about to say something else when George asked him, "Why aren't you partying with all the others? Don't you want to have fun? You might even find yourself a partner." "Huh." And he laughed. Jason answered, "I don't really feel like partying. And girls aren't my interest right now." Then George was about to say something when Jason looked in the mirror and got scared. Then Jason shouted, "Look! Bird tsunami!" And we see tens of thousands of crows flying towards the yacht. Then George shouted, "Shit! Warn the others. They hopefully can't break this glass." Jason ran out and started shouting to everyone to get inside. Some of them listened but some of them just ignored him. Then crows came closer and Jason went back inside driving center. Then we see around 10 men and 2 women which stayed outside get attacked by crows. Crows started eating their flesh slowly. Left humans started screaming for help but 20 men were no match for 10,000 flesh-eating crows. Then the screams of suffering men and women slowly faded away. The crows stayed on yacht for around 10 minutes and then flew away. Then we see Jason coming out and looking down at the place where the party was held. Then other 20 men and women came out and got so terrified, some of them even started puking. Then we see bloody skeletons which were humans just 15 minutes ago. Jason gets so sad and then shouts, "It's very bad. I know. But we have to take out the corpses. Or skeletons. Or whatever you call this mess." Everyone agreed and started picking the skeletons and throwing them into the ocean. Discussion room where Michael is presenting something to engineers and scientists. Dr. Laura Brown and Alvin Clark are also there. Then Michael says that they need to improve the missiles and feet. Then he laughed and said, "My feet felt so heavy like I was walking in the freaking water. You need to make it smoother, understood?" Then Dr. Alvin asked Michael, "When are you planning to attack Skull Island?" Then Michael told him, "You really are rushing towards that, aren't you? We have decades for it, Dr. Alvin." Then Alvin apologized. Then Dr. Brown asked Michael, "Are you sure you can take on 4 titans? I mean, there will be Behemoth, Rodan, Mothra, Kong and quite possibly Godzilla too." Michael told her, "Of course I do. BR is unstoppable. No titan teeth or laser will ever break its metal. Not to mention its titan smashing fists." Then he looked at the screen where he had put up the presentation and said, "I will have my revenge. I promise." After that we see Yacht which is still swimming in the ocean. Then we see Jason which is sleeping on the chair. Then he opens his eyes and gets up. He yawns and starts walking up the stairs to check on George. He gets in the driving room, and sees George which is sitting and is reading newspaper with no kind of interest. Jason asked him, "What are you reading?" George answered, "Some old crap I found in here." Then Jason laughed and looked out of the window and his expression changed from funny to shocked. He said stutteringly, Do you see that?" George looked out and when he saw it he smiled. They saw a giant cloud of storm on the ocean. Then George shouted, "That's the storm that's surrounding Skull Island." Jason started laughing and shouted, "Oh yeah. Here we go." George also started shouting, "Woo! Let's freaking go, man. We're here." Then we see other 20 survivors going to the front of the yacht and looking at the cloud of the storm which is around 4 kilometers away. Then we see Jason also coming out and climbing on the roof. Then he stands on the roof and smiles. 30 minutes later. Then we see Yacht entering the storm that's surrounding Skull Island. Then George shouts, "Everybody hold on." Then Jason gets inside the driving room and asks George, "How's everything going? Need some help?" George told him, "No. And now hang on to something. This storm is cruel. Jason then shook and almost fell. George shouted, "Told ya." Then Jason sat on the chair next to George, got his seatbelts on. Then we see shot of yacht which is being bounced around by giant waves. After a few minutes of this nightmare, the yacht came out on the calm sea. George and Jason were looking from the window and they couldn't believe their eyes. They saw Skull Island and its beauty. Then Jason stuttered and said, "This place. It's freaking amazing." Then George laughed and we see yacht which is swimming inside the river of Skull Island. We see the yacht slowly entering the river of Skull Island. We see birds flying above it. Jason standing on the roof of yacht and he is completely shocked. George is just smiling. Then we see yacht swimming in the river of Skull Island surrounded by so many rock mountains. Then we see Jason getting inside the driving cabin and he tells George, "Well, you definitely were not wrong about this place, old man." And he hit her shoulder with his hand. After that we see other survivors on yacht just completely shocked and happy. But then they hear some sounds from one of the rock mountains. They look towards the direction of the sound and see Skullcrawler which is roaring at them. Then Skullcrawler jumped and he landed on the yacht. Then he was about to attack someone when he heard the roar of Mothra. He looked behind and saw Mothra flying towards him. Mothra soon grabbed him with one of her stings, and she took her up in the sky and she threw Skullcrawler from around 1,000 feet. Skullcrawler fell close to yacht and its organs just completely fell out cause of height impact. Then we see Jason. He smiles and says, "Wow." Then George shouted from inside the cabin, "It's Mothra. Or Titaness Mothra, I don't care, she's known as Queen of the Monsters." Jason shouted, "Ah, yes. Moth Queen." And he laughed. Then yacht continued swimming until they heard the sounds of helicopters. They looked at the sky and saw around 10 Monarch helicopters flying towards them. Then Jason said, "This is it. The suffering, the pain, the running away and such things are finally over." Then one of the soldiers of Monarch said through speakers which were attached on one of the helicopters,
Hello people. We've come to conclusion that you are lost and our squad will come and pick you up inside the helicopters. Please do not resist.
Then George docked the yacht on of the rocks and helicopters picked up all survivors. Then we see Jason getting out of the helicopter, and he starts walking inside the large underground base with large empty space for helicopters and people hanging around. This base was set in the mountain. Then we Monarch soldiers giving survivors some food, water and bed sheets. Then Jason started looking around the base and he was just so surprised. Then we see George coming to him and he asks Jason, "You like this place, huh?" Jason answered, "I don't like it, I love it. It's paradise compared to where we lived." Then George was about to say something when one woman told Jason, "I see you are new ones here." Jason turned around and saw a tall woman with black hair. Woman came closer to Jason and she shook his hand. The woman said, "I am Madison Russell. I am daughter of the head of the space, Mark Russell." Jason said, "Hi. Madison, my name is Jason Armstrong." Then Madison told him, "Nice to meet you, Jason. Our team will take to the cottages and get comfortable. You'll have beds, bathrooms and living room." Jason told her, "Thank you, Miss Madison." Madison then said, "Okay, goodbye," and walked away. Jason said, "Wow." And he was about to walk away, but then George stopped him and asked him while smiling, "You like her, don't you?" Jason immediately answered, "What? No. What are you talking about?" Then George told him, "You don't need to deny it. I can see it in your eyes." Jason told him, "You don't see anything, old man. Now let me get to my room, will ya?" George said, "Okay. Okay. Geez." Jason picked up his small bag and walked in one of the doors. Then he walked corridor for like a minute and got to small room with bed, wardrobe, small table and bathroom next to it. Jason shouted, "Now this is better than the freaking tent." He threw his bag at wardrobe and he jumped on the bed and he was slowly starting to sleep when he felt the base and ground shake. He stooped and said under his breath, "Is it what I think it is? Then there is no way I am missing that." He stood up from his bed. He opened the door of his door and ran towards the exit of the base. He came out of base while other soldiers were running inside, and he saw Kong wandering near the base while holding his axe. Jason shouted with excitement, "Holy shit! He's bigger than I expected him to be." Then Kong looked at him and sighed a little bit. Jason stood there in complete shock when one of the soldiers of G-Team approached Jason and told him it might good idea if we go inside the base, it's more safe you know? Jason answered oh yes. Yeah. For sure. And he followed the soldier inside. Then we see George which is also looking at Kong through glass walls, and he just can't hold the tears of happiness. He says I never thought I'd see him again. I've missed this big guy so much. Then someone asked from behind of him you worked for Monarch didn't you? George looked back and saw Mark Russell standing around 15 feet away from him. George asked in confusion and excitement you are head of the Monarch right? You are Mark suddenly said Russell. Yes Mark Russell. And I think you are George Potts am I wrong? George answered no sir. And it's an honor meeting you. Then Mark was about to say something when phone called him. Mark said it's my wife. Her name is Ling Chen did you know her? She also worked for Monarch. George answered no sir. I haven't had the pleasure. Then Mark laughed and told him okay. I really got to answer her. See you round. And Mark walked away and answered his phone. George said wow. What a nice guy. Then we see Jason going back to his room and he sits on the bed, he is still in shock and excitement. Then he says wow. Now that's really cool. And he was about to sleep when he suddenly remembers something. He put the hand in his pocket and took out the USB. He thought for a moment and said I gotta give this to them. Then he went towards the main controlling center and told Madison you gotta check this USB. While still sweating from running, Madison looked confused and asked him why is it so important? Jason told her we had a camp near Hong Kong. And bad guys slaughtered our entire camp well almost, Madison told him oh. I am so sorry Jason. But then Jason said yes but that's not my point. Couple of these bad guys died and one of them had this USB. Madison told him well I still don't get why these bad guys are so big deal to us. Jason said well you better sit down when you hear this. They are highly advanced and they took the head of the freaking Mechagodzilla. Madison asked they what? Jason then told her calmly that's why this USB might be very important. You need to plug it somewhere. Madison told him of course. But I need to tell my father about this. Then we cut to Mark in his room which already heard the story from Madison and he shouts what? Seriously? Why would anyone need that mechanical abomination's head? Then Jason answered we might be able to find out using that USB. Mark then said Monty bring my laptop. Madison ran to other room and she soon brought Mark's laptop. Mark turned it on and Jason plugged the USB, and folder popped up on the screen. Mark opened it and saw just a whole bunch of files in there, but then they saw one photo file and Madison told Mark open this photo. Let us see what this is. Mark said yeah and he opened the photo. The photo displayed some sort of an mechanical arm and some details about it, and photo also said that the hand was 72 meters long. Mark asked nervously what the hell would need the hand that freaking big? Then Madison shouted check other photos? But all the photos only displayed the arm and some information about it. Madison asked Jason but how did the regular troop manage to have that? Jason answered he wasn't just a regular troop, he was their general. Then Madison said that's not good. Someone is probably making another Mechanic Titan that might explain why Godzilla is not coming back. After that we get back to Neo Rackspace and we see that the recharging of BR has just been finished. Then we see Michael which is preparing to go into the controlling cube again. Then we see Dr. Alvine shouting okay everybody to their places. We are launching in 60 seconds. Then he turned to Michael and told him okay though boy. Time to get in. Michael said on it old man. He went inside and two scientists put the controlling costume on him. Then Alvine said okay. I am turning it on. He turned BR on and Michael's costume also got lit. Michael felt a little pain for a couple of seconds, but he soon moved on from it and he pulled his arm up and BR pulled the arm up too. Then Michael told Alvine you sure did make it smoother old man. Alvin just smiled and Michael shouted time for revenge has finally come. BR came up from its base and started running towards ocean, then it jumped into the ocean and special swimming fans activated on his legs and ribs, and he started swimming towards Skull Island. After that we see Mark Russell running in controlling center shouting, everybody get ready for evacuation. We might have another monstrosity coming to this island. And I want everyone to be on alert. Then everyone agrees to him and start packing important things, and Monarch soldiers start preparing their helicopters. Then he turned to one of the soldiers which was walking towards exit and asked him, "Where is my wife?" Soldier answered in a rush, "I think she's with our Hollow Earth exploring team, she really seems like it, sir." And he ran towards exit. Mark said, "Damn it." Then he turned to one of the men with the computer and he told him, "Cancel every Hollow Earth expeditions. And bring everyone back up. We might be leaving soon." Man said, "Yes sir." And he contacted every Hollow Earth team and told them to immediately come back up. Then we see around 6 Hevs and we see 2 explorers dressed in black suit listen to orders. Then they turn their heads to somebody and say, "Ma'am, we have to leave this place now." Then we see Dr. Chen, which has her helmet taken off. She was looking at old cave paintings and village underground when she was interrupted by these 2 men and she asked them, "Why? What's happening?" Then one of the explorers told her, "We don't really know, they say it must be done immediately." Then other Hevs started taking off and one of the explorers shouted while running in the Hev, "Let's go." Dr. Chen along with other explorers got into Hev and Hev took off. Then we see Doctor going towards Mark and Madison, which were talking in the controlling center, and asks, "What's happening? It has never been like that in here." Mark told Madison, "Go get in one of the helicopters. We'll be there soon." Madison said, "Sure," and walked towards exit. Then Mark said, "I just discovered that maybe giant mechanical rhino will attack this city." Dr. Chen laughed and said, "What the? Seriously?" Mark told her, "I'm serious. I saw it in. You know what, it's a long story, you have to trust me." Dr. Chen said, "Okay. Fine, but I'll need a..." But before she could finish her sentence a bunch of rockets exploded on the roof of their base. Mark shouted, "Holy shit!" and ran towards the hallway which lead to helicopter stands. They soon got there and we see Jason, George and Madison running towards Mark and Chen, and Madison tells Mark and Chen, "We were waiting for you. Quickly. Let's get in a damn helicopter." And as they started running towards helicopter stands, ceiling got hit with so many missiles that entire ceiling fell down and it resulted many deaths. All people got scared and shocked and George shouted, "What the hell?" Then Mark shouted, "Let's go to the shelter. It must be safe." But then Madison said, "It won't be. We will be completely defenseless against this thing." Then Jason shouted, "Then we should just run away." And they started running towards the exit of the base. Then we see BR, which is emerging on the shore while still firing missiles at the base and at the island too. Then we see Kong, which jumps down around 600 meters away from BR and he looks at it with so angry face. BR unleashes its robotic roar and Kong roars back in rage. Then we get to Michael in the controlling cube and he says, "Do you remember me, monkey? You will." Then it hit its 2 fists at each other and said, "If you somehow survive," and fired around 30 missiles at Kong. Kong felt much pain but he started running towards BR anyway. Then BR jumped away and dodged Kong, and he hit its heavy fist to Kong in the head and Kong dropped on the ground. Then Michael shouted, "You are lucky I can't fly." Then he took with his one hand, since it was 165 meters, and he threw Kong at Monarch, which caused the base to be completely smashed. Then we see Jason, George, Madison, Mark, Chen and other people running on the beach. George turns around, stops and says, "That shit is much stronger than freaking Gorosaurus." Then we see Kong, which was about to get up but BR pushed him back with its feet and it stood on Kong. Then Michael said, "Now you will die." And he was about to completely crash Kong's chest when he heard the roar of Rudin. He looked to his left and saw Rudin flying towards him, which soon crashed at BR's head and made BR knock on the ground. Then we see Mothra flying while holding Kong's axe with her legs. Then she threw it to Kong and Kong caught it and immediately hit BR. But metal of BR was so strong that axe got bit blended. Kong looked scared and BR hit its fist to Kong in the face. Then Rudin flew towards BR. BR caught him and he made Rudin's head stuck in the shore. He said, "Now do me a favor and be a good ostrich." And it hit Rudin its feet and Rudin fell. Then Kong stood up and hit BR in the head with axe. It didn't do anything to BR and BR pushed Kong and Kong fell into a hole caused by Nazuki and he fell over 500 meters down onto a giant destroyed ancient town. Then BR looked down on him and jumped on him. His impact made land below it and Kong collapsed and they fell into even deeper depths that weren't even discovered yet. He fell another 900 meters and he was now in a giant swamp. Water level was about 30 meters. Then BR recovered and tried to hit Kong. Kong dodged and tried to run away. He found giant rope and threw it at hole he fell down from, and he soon swinged and climbed up. BR tried to do the same, but as soon as he grabbed rope it fell off cause of its weight. Michael shouted, "Send the grabbies now." Then we see two giant flying ships, around 60 meters, take off from Nirax's base and they start flying towards Skull Island. Then we see Kong climbing up from a hole. He crawls and decides to rest, but then he sees two spaceships approach the island. He stands up and roars at them, but they soon go down inside the hole. Kong approaches the hole and looks down, but he immediately gets shot in the face by the missiles. He gets away from the hole because of pain, but then he turns back to it and he sees two spaceships carrying up BR. BR came on the ground and jumped towards Kong. Kong blocked his fist, but BR hit another one and Kong falls down, but then Kong makes BR slip with his feet. BR almost fell but caught balance. Kong stood up, he jumped and made a drop kick on BR. BR fell and Kong jumped on it and tried to take off its head. He tired real hard, but then he gets stabbed by BR's sticky tail. Kong screams in pain and BR kicked him and Kong fell off. BR stood up and stepped on Kong. Michael said, "Oh, look at how tables have turned." But then it took its leg off Kong and it was about to push Kong again when he got hit by Godzilla's atomic breath. BR lost its balance and got knocked out. Then Kong looked at Beach and saw Godzilla walking towards BR. Godzilla roared in anger. BR started standing up, but Mothra attacked it with her webs and BR got knocked back down. Then Mothra sat near Godzilla and roared. Kong stood up and ran towards his axe. BR soon stood up and roared at Godzilla. Godzilla roared back and ran towards it. Then Michael said, "I'll not spare this shiny lizard this time." And BR ran towards Godzilla too. Then BR jumped up to hit Godzilla, but Godzilla dodged and hit his tail to BR in the face. BR stood up and tried to hit Godzilla again, but Godzilla dodged again and bite BR in the hand. BR hit Godzilla and Godzilla got off BR. Then BR pushed Godzilla with its feet. Godzilla got exhausted and fell on the ground. Then Kong jumped in and hit BR with his axe in the head. It didn't have much effect, but BR got exhausted for a couple of seconds and Godzilla struck him with atomic breath and BR pushed back. Then Godzilla stood up and stood beside Kong. Then BR stood up and roared in extreme rage, but then Rodan attacked it from behind and he flew towards Godzilla, Kong, and Mothra. BR stood there in rage seeing four titans standing in front of him. BR smashed its two fists together and ran towards them. Titans also ran towards him. BR first knocked Rodan, then it smashed Mothra. Kong jumped up to hit it, but it caught him and threw him at Godzilla. Then it grabbed Kong and pulled him closer. Then he pulled him in the air and threw Kong at one of the mountains. Kong got so much damaged and could barely stand up. Then BR started walking towards Kong. Then Godzilla got up and saw the hole which led to Hollow Earth and even deeper places cause of Kong's and BR's fight. Godzilla then looked at BR's back which had logo of Neorax. Godzilla realized something and he ran towards BR. Then we see Kong which is punching BR, but he can barely do any damage to it. But then Godzilla pushed BR away and started pulling it towards the hole to the Hollow Earth. Kong realized Godzilla's plan and he pulling BR too. BR tried to resist, but they were pulling so strong. Michael shouted, "They are pulling me towards the damn pit. That kind of impact will destroy that robot. You should have added flying equipment, old man." Dr. Alvine shouted, "Stop complaining, tough boy. Resist this monkey and lizard." And when Godzilla and Kong brought BR to the edge of the pit, Kong jumped up and drop-kicked BR in the pit. BR couldn't hold on to anything and it fell with so big impact that half the mecha exploded and almost all the systems stopped. BR couldn't get up and all the metal was fallen off its body. Then Godzilla roared at it from above and he started charging his atomic breath. Then we see Michael which is also laying on the ground cause of BR. He starts shouting, "Oh no. 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 No." Then Godzilla stroked BR with his atomic breath. BR got completely exploded after 10 seconds. Godzilla stopped his atomic breath. He looked around and roared. Kong also started roaring. Then we see Michael which is getting out of his suit and he's really pissed. One doctor goes in the box to help him up, but Michael punches him in the face and pushes him away and starts screaming, "My only hope of revenge just got destroyed. This world freaking hates me." Then he went towards Alvine and punched him in the face too. Then other soldiers of Nirax stepped in and took Michael away while Michael just struggled to get out of their hands. Then Alvine stood up and he was bleeding from his nose. He shouted, "God damn it," and punched one of the computers in the room and computer's screen broke. After that we see Kong which is looking down the hole he created while fighting BR. Then we see Godzilla walking towards the shore. Then he gets in the ocean and heads somewhere. Then we see human characters get closer to Kong, which is still looking inside that hole. Then he thought for a moment, grabbed his axe and jumped in upper hollow earth. Then he jumped into lower depths and started walking in the giant swamp. He walked for 2 minutes and found giant gate inside the rocks. He thought for a moment and decided to go in. He went into giant maze-like place with paintings of other Kong species fighting bunch of Gorosauruses. Then he walked out of the maze and ended up in giant throne room with one giant throne in the center, and so many skeletons of Kong species. This place was completely swamped with around 100 bat-like things which were around 13 feet chilling on the ceiling. Kong started slowly walking towards the throne while stepping and breaking other skeletons with his feet. Then he got to throne and touched the throne with his hand, and tears started pouring from his eye. But then he heard snake sounds coming from behind him. He looked behind and saw another snake of Nazuki's species. Kong held his axe and roared at her, and then another Nazuki pulled her head up from behind the throne. Nazuki from the front attacked Kong and Kong threw her at another Nazuki behind him. Then he hit his axe to them and one of them lost head while another got half chopped. Kong stuck his axe in the throne and grabbed remaining Nazuki through her throat, and he started eating her head. Then he ate her halfway and dropped her head and grabbed his axe again. But then he realized that impact of axe awakened the bats, so they awakened and started attacking Kong. Kong started swinging his axe and killed several of them. But then bats started flying out of the castle. Kong realized that they were going to the surface and he started chasing them. Then we see destroyed base of Monarch on Skull Island, where people are helping the injured people. Then we see Jason approaching George, which is standing beside the Monarch jeep. Jason tells him, "Hey old man. What's up?" George answered, "Nothing. Nothing much. I really hope we are done for today." Jason answered smiling, "Me too." And then the bats emerged from the hole and started attacking the base which still had injured people in it. Jason and George quickly got inside the jeep and started it to go pick up Madison, Dr. Chen, and Mark. Then they stopped in front of them, and as Madison started running towards the jeep, Mark pushed her and got picked up by one of the bats. Madison shouted, "Dad." Jason quickly came out of the jeep and grabbed her inside the car. Dr. Chen also got inside the jeep and we see how bats are tearing Mark's body apart. Then we see inside the jeep where Dr. Chen tells Madison, "He sacrificed himself for you, Maddie." Then Jason started the jeep and went towards shores, and we see bats picking up bunch of other people of Monarch. Then we see Kong coming up from the hole and swinging his axe towards the bats in hopes of stopping them. Bats got little scared and went towards the storm which surrounds the island and escaped from Skull Island. Kong roared in rage and dropped his axe on the ground. Then we see Jason driving and he says, "What did we do to deserve this?" After that we see base of Nirax and there's rain. We see warships around the shore of it and soldiers just walking on those warships. Then we see inside one of the warships and we see that radar is picking some signal which is coming closer. One of the soldiers sees this and calls other soldiers to check it out. Then they both realize something and look at each other and both say, "Godzilla." At the same time, then they warned other ships and main base and Alvine shouted, "Damn it. He must have recognized cause he's been sailing here before. Why the hell did Michael even put our big ass logo on that robot?" Then one of the soldiers answered, "Cause the robot was still in making when it wasn't the apocalypse, sir, and he wanted people to admire our brand." Alvine looked at that soldier and told him, "I didn't ask for answer, you idiot." After that we see warships firing at Godzilla. As Godzilla approaches, he emerges and destroys one of the warships with his dorsal fins. Then he turned to other two ships and pulled his giant tail up and destroyed two warships with it. Then he started swimming towards the shore and destroyed one more warship on the way. Then we see Dr. Alvine and other soldiers getting inside the helicopters. Then they bring Michael to one of the helicopters and Alvine stops the soldiers and tells them, "You know we won't need that bastard anymore. Execute him." Michael shouted, "No. No. Are you serious?" One of the soldiers punched him in the stomach and other three soldiers started shooting at Michael. Alvine shouted after 6 seconds, "Okay. Enough. Now let's get the hell out of here." He closed the door of the helicopter and the helicopter flew up. Then we see Godzilla smashing the base and destroying it with his atomic breath. Then he saw around 50 helicopters flying away. He charged his atomic breath and shot at the helicopters. He destroyed most of them, but 6 of them escaped and one of them had Dr. Alvine and Brown in it. Then Godzilla continued destroying the base with his atomic breath. He stopped his atomic breath and roared in rage. credit scene we see Dr. Alvine, which is still in helicopter. Then we see other helicopters flying over the Pacific Ocean. Then helicopter pilots say, "Hold on," and start flying faster. Dr. Alvine looked out of the window of helicopter and bunch of 13 feet bats heading towards the helicopters. He says, "What in the hell?"